Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discoveries, our discussions, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. And that brings us to that title, which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1153. This is a film that was released in the year 1944, and the name of the filmmaker is Frank Capra, and the name of the work is Arsenic and Old Lace. This is the work from the year 1944, or released in the year 1944, and it is from the great filmmaker Frank Capra, and it has a fantastic cast, included in which are, for example, Raymond Massey and Priscilla Lane and Peter Lorre, and of course starring the one, the only Cary Grant in one of those brilliant iconic performances that has so much going on. The whole cast, there's so many great performances in this work, which is the brilliant and so twisted and so funny and so carefree and entertaining and macabre and disturbing work, which is Arsenic and Old Lace. And indeed, I think in that brief description, I'm trying to suggest just how many different, say, extremes, one can say, this film Arsenic and Old Lace seems to contain within its running time. And it contains those extremes in a brilliant, balanced way that never loses sight of the fact that it is both in many ways, a type of twisted, macabre horror film on the one hand, and also it is a funny, light, and entertaining, almost screwball comedy on the other. And these elements, I think, never contradict each other, but on the contrary, they balance each other so brilliantly and so thoroughly entertaining, in an entertaining way, thus to pave the way for the foundation of this brilliant classic that is Arsenic and Old Lace. And there are many of these details that emerge in some of the supplemental material, the commentary track, for example, as well as the essay. And we'll get to a discussion of those points a little bit later in this video discussion. But before that, my dear friends, let's talk a little bit about this film, the plot or story structure. And I think there's much to say about it. I think we can talk, of course, about this main character, Mortimer Brewster, the Cary Grant character, and we meet him immediately or almost immediately in terms of his relationship with the Priscilla Lane character. This is Elaine. However, we also understand that in terms of their family roots and his relatives, and in fact, both of them respectively, in terms of this area, Brooklyn, we find that they have certain family connections. In particular, Mortimer has certain family connections, the Brewster family connections with Abby and Martha in this house in Brooklyn. And my goodness, when we discover early on what's going on in terms of these two seemingly sweet old ladies who are occupying this house and who are entertaining lodging guest visitors in their house, my goodness, when we see the sitting quarters and the number of hats accumulated, and the basement, and the Panama Canal, and death and destruction, and macabre and twisted circumstances galore, we understand that we are in a world that is filled with not just love and romance and almost romantic screwball hijinks. We're also in a world that is filled with a twisted domain of death and murder, and poisoning and burying of bodies and almost this idea of madness and insanity, as well as the almost the wicked or twisted or dark secrets of a family. And again, at the same time, those family secrets and those family connections, or perhaps lack thereof in a manner of speaking, they pave the way for yet further development and plot twists and turns, especially when we get to the characters who are portrayed by Raymond Massey and Peter Lorre, and what it is they bring to the table in terms of their own brand of mayhem and murder and violence, or the threat thereof. And when we get to this idea of mistaken identity, and we get towards the idea of the potential threat or risk to one of the key relationships that we see in this film, Arsenic and Old Lace, that being the relationship between the characters portrayed by Priscilla Lane and Cary Grant, etc., we see that we are in for some quite hair-raising spectacles indeed. But again, never losing sight at the same time, never losing sight of the wonderful, almost fantastic like fantasy-like elements that are embedded, I think, within the entertaining light touch of the screwball comedy that is embedded within this film, which I think is anchored so well by the wonderful performance by Cary Grant. I mean, it's mentioned as part of the points that's mentioned in a David Cairns essay, which is a great essay, and we'll again speak about it a little bit later. But what's so wonderful about his brand of, say, comedy and humor here, Cary Grant's, is that it is the way in which this film is able, or it's one of the ways in which this film is able to anchor itself in, I think, a way that is so accessible. This is quite grisly stuff. We're talking about murder and poisoning and trying to evade the police, and this almost nonchalant way that people are offed and people are buried, bodies are buried, etc. So it's and where they are hidden, etc. So it's and there are many bodies galore as well. So it's pretty grisly stuff. But what makes it so funny and so entertaining, or one of the ways that makes it so funny and entertaining, is the anchoring of the Cary Grant performance. I mean, we have this way in which we as viewers can identify and recognize our positionings with Cary Grant's, say, reactions and his shock and horror. But those reactions of shock and horror are always linked with an idea of the screwball hijinks. I mean, he has a way in which he's able to portray broad physical comedy so effectively in terms of the look and manner. And when we see these almost must be seen to be believed, or must be heard to be believed, type of bizarre circumstances that are happening under the roof of this seemingly peaceful house, we understand that his reactions indeed are quite justified, and not just justified, they are performed with such grace and almost ballet-like physical command over his physical, say, performance, that makes it so charming, entertaining, and so funny as well. The way even he moves his eyes, or the way he tries to hide panic, or the way he tries to go from one end of the room to the other in order to try to evade certain circumstances, or protect certain people, or maybe try to hide the truth, or what he thinks that the truth is at a given moment in time. So this is one of the great strengths, and we see how this is also carried over in other aspects and other performances as well, in terms of action and reaction. And that aspect of action and reaction also has with it a real sense of the glamour and glory, say, of a sense of a golden age of Hollywood, and things that we can see maybe preceding this film and also subsequent to this film, where this film has a sense of an anchor, an echo of a hallmark or homage or respect to that which is this golden age of Hollywood. Case in point, the mentioning or the featuring of Raymond Massey and his performance. I mean, his performance is a very, very critical one. His character is a very critical one. Jonathan, and so and his relationship to the Mortimer character, and also his relationship to the Peter Lorre character, and also how he brings a certain sense of menace and despair, and almost a kind of spooky quality, and that spooky quality itself is embedded in a sense of comedy and humor, and that comedy and humor is tenfold because we also understand that it brings with it an understanding, an almost meta quality, almost a breaking of the fourth wall in a manner of speaking, of an understanding of Hollywood stardom and famous actors, and the way in which this film is also linked to that type of sense of golden age of Hollywood, and Boris Karloff and all that. So it has this cleverness that is multidimensional. It is also a film that is set in or it has its roots in the theater, and so it has this sense of staging and use of the environment quite well. I mean, the levels are very much part of this in terms of the main floor and what's suggested in the upper floors and what's also suggested in the lower floors as well. So there's a sense of space which has this lovely theatrical quality about it, which perhaps reminds us of its theater roots, but also has a certain dynamism in terms of what is shown outside. I mean, the landscape that's shown outside, the graveyard aspect of it, which also has a nice visual and thematic motif link to what's going on inside the house as well. And so it has that feeling about it, but it also has, as I say, that sense of the almost multidimensional cinema quality, almost meta fourth wall breaking type of quality that makes it so clever, while at the same time showcasing these wonderful talents, these wonderful delights that are, again, bouncing off each other in a way that seems almost in this incongruent, almost inconsequential way, quite lively and quite light and frothy. That suggests the brilliant, entertaining character nature of screwball romantic comedy that is also very dark and macabre and very twisted indeed. And so we have these wonderfully delightful performances that seem to set certain extremes in this fashion. So I mentioned, of course, Cary Grant and Priscilla Lane. There's also Josephine Hull and Gina Dare as this wonderful these wonderful ladies, the Brewster ladies, Abby and Martha, and what they bring and their tone and demeanor in their performance, and how it seems to be a 180 extreme to what the events are that are surrounding them, and indeed what it is they are engaged in as well. We should also mention John Alexander's performance here. Again, another link to the Brewster clan that is part of this, and the link to, say, Teddy Roosevelt and the Panama Canal, which also forms a lot of the furtherance of the comic and humorous hijinks in this film. So it is very explosive. It's very, in a beautiful way, it's very much a film that is all over the place. Because it is a film of extremes, but it's done in a way that is always very grounded. It always lets the viewer in on the joke in a wonderfully warm and welcoming way. And it is so thoroughly funny and entertaining, and also very twisted and very clever at the same time. And this is a film that has it all. This is a film that has it all and then some. What a wonderful film this is, and what a great entry, or re-entry, as we shall see in the later discussion of this film, into the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. It is a wonderful film to have. It's another Frank Capra work, and my goodness, what a classic, iconic Frank Capra work. This is a film that has it all. And so if you haven't seen this film yet, I strongly recommend you check it out. This is so much fun. It's so funny. It's so clever, witty. It's so almost devilish in a lot of ways, and that and so much more. This is the work which, again, released in the year 1944. This is the work from Frank Capra. That is Arsenic and Old Lace. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Arsenic and Old Lace, on this new edition for purposes of 2022 releases. This happens to be the Blu-ray edition that I have here at SPY number 1153. Now, I've also taken the liberty prior to the start of this video to remove from the inside the fold-out insert. And I've done so for a number of reasons, one of which being it does have notes about the transfer on one of the pages. And I quote, "About the transfer. Arsenic and Old Lace is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. This new digital transfer was created in 16-bit 4K resolution on a Laser Graphics Director film scanner from the 35mm nitrate original camera negative. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 35mm optical soundtrack positive. And so I must say that I have very little frame of reference in terms of watching Arsenic and Old Lace. I've only seen it on, say, home media releases. I've never seen it on the big screen or anything like that. So my experience with presentation history is quite limited, I admit. But with that background, that limited background notwithstanding, let me say that I'm very impressed with the way this looks and feels and sounds. It does have a certain edge and crispness about it, which I find very, very absorbing and very well worth watching indeed. I suppose I could say that maybe part of my experience with this film, or viewing this film on a number of occasions for a number of years, part of my viewing experience was actually with the Criterion Collection. And this, let me just bring up the point that, as some of you may know, Arsenic and Old Lace was actually also a Criterion Collection Laserdisc back in the day. And the Criterion Laserdisc spine number is 136. And here I have the Laserdisc edition right here. And in fact, for certain reasons, due to printing and catalog numbers, etc., I actually have two of these Laserdiscs here, so they actually have slightly different catalog numbers for those who might know the catalog number history of Criterion Laserdisc releases. But in any event, here we have Arsenic and Old Lace in its Laserdisc glory back in the day. Again, spine number 136 for the Laserdiscs. And so in that regard, Arsenic and Old Lace was part of the Criterion Collection back in the day, and now we have this occasion to see it enter or re-enter the Criterion Collection physical media catalog in this stunning way. And so I'm always very pleased and very, very happy whenever the Criterion Collection releases or re-releases a prior Laserdisc title into its current Blu-ray, DVD, or 4K catalog. And that's certainly the case for Arsenic and Old Lace. So well done, Criterion, for yet again including yet another Laserdisc title now in its current catalog. So here we have the older, still great Laserdisc releases of Arsenic and Old Lace, but now we have the new 4K restoration-based version for the Blu-ray right here. So it's a great edition. And so please check out this edition if you haven't already, or if you have yet to see this film for the first time. This is a wonderful place to go for experiencing this funny and outrageous and wonderfully entertaining work, Arsenic and Old Lace. And then let us now speak about the supplements which might be found together with this release. And the supplements include, first up, a commentary track. And this is a commentary track which is described as being from the year 2022. And it is featuring Charles Dennis, who is very, very excellently so an expert in terms of the films of Frank Capra, and in particular, the history and production, say, details and background and anecdotes of Arsenic and Old Lace, and all the various, say, components related to that, including the actors that appear in this, and also the relationship with the Broadway play and the Hollywood production of the film, etc., etc. So this is a great commentary track. Let me say again, this is a great commentary track. It's wonderful to get a 2022 commentary track for a 2022 Blu-ray release like we have here. And the reason why I wish that all Criterion releases had commentary tracks is actually for reasons like this, because they are really, really great. And you get so much great bits of information, especially from someone, from my perspective, who has, say, a very limited knowledge base when it comes to Arsenic and Old Lace and Frank Capra works, etc. So this is really fantastic, very, very helpful, illuminative, and as I say, filled with so much information and well presented by Charles Dennis, who obviously knows all the ins and outs when it comes to this great work, as well as being able to present it in a way that's so easy to listen to and very kind on the ear, and wonderful listening all around. So there are a lot of points that can be taken from this wonderful commentary track. For example, I mentioned, or it's been oft mentioned, of course, about the links to or the genesis of the film Arsenic and Old Lace and its connection with the Broadway show, the very successful Broadway show from the early 1940s. And indeed, this detail of the Broadway show run and the success of the Broadway show run had a lot to do with the making of the film versus the timing of the film's release. And these are some details that Charles Dennis goes into as well. So this is really interesting, very fascinating detail about maybe what one might call the relatively speaking, maybe unexpected longevity and popularity and success of the Broadway show. In fact, it went for many, many years. Which then is regarded as being the primary reason for the quote-unquote delay of the film's public release. So this is, again, very fascinating. Again, it reminds us, too, about the links to the Broadway show heritage. And this also brings up another great point of the commentary track, which is that Charles Dennis does point out certain, say, comparisons, similarities and differences between the Broadway show version and then the film version, the Frank Capra version. And so there are elements of, say, storytelling and maybe dialogue that might be said to have a certain different ring to it. This is also brought up in a very fascinating, interesting flow by Charles Dennis here in terms of the ways in which the play was, say, adapted versus how it was changed due to maybe certain cinematic style considerations or perhaps considerations of the actual playwriting itself. In any event, we have similarities and differences that are spoken about in this commentary track in a very, very wonderfully clear and very easy to process sort of way. So this is also very good, especially for someone, as I say, like myself, who has a very, very limited knowledge base when it comes to this film, and indeed, for example, when it comes to the ins and outs of the Broadway play dynamics, etc. So this is very, very helpful indeed. So this is also a very fascinating way in which this film, I think, this film commentary track really gives the groundwork for elaboration on the process of adaptation, and also maybe the mechanics, and also some of the backstage politics, as it were, when it comes to Hollywood film productions and the like. So very fascinating and stuff indeed. And also part of the production history and value of this film, as described in the commentary track, can be said to be there with regard to the performers, the actors that are there, or indeed not there, as the case may be. So what do I mean by this? So for example, Charles Dennis does talk about, say, Cary Grant, and also the Archie Leach, and some history and background regarding Cary Grant and his trajectory in terms of his popularity as becoming a Hollywood star. And in many ways, this film, Arsenic and Old Lace, in many ways solidifies that, but also in an interesting way, perhaps could be said to be, interestingly enough, slightly going off image or off brand in a manner of speaking, although it is still thoroughly, through and by the by, it is thoroughly a Cary Grant work and one of the iconic performances of Cary Grant. It actually shows his range of comedy and physical humor and lightness of touch and the charm and appeal and charisma so thoroughly. And yet at the same time, it does have a certain ring of, say, it has a certain element that might be said to be somewhat distinct from, say, his works that he became very famous for in terms of his Hollywood career, in terms of his work, say, with Alfred Hitchcock, etc. So although there is a lot of the Cary Grant charm there. So this is, I think, a really interesting point that's raised in terms of how this role, as iconic as it is, fits into the whole, say, oeuvre of Cary Grant's filmography in a brilliant way, I should say. So this is one great discussion point as well. And also other great discussion points, too, about, say, Boris Karloff. And Boris Karloff is, of course, a very important figure in terms of the Broadway performance, and also in terms of the, let's say, appearance/non-appearance, shall we say, in terms of the film. Of course, we have Raymond Massey, the character of Jonathan. And then there's discussion as to why Boris Karloff himself did not appear in the film role of Jonathan, even though he did make the role his own in the Broadway run. And indeed, also too, we'll see or we'll hear Boris Karloff in the radio play, which we'll talk about as one of the other supplements here. But this is again a very fascinating story and one that needs to be told, because Boris Karloff's appearance slash non-appearance is indeed one of the interesting and lovely, say, anecdotal quirks, if you will, of the background history and story of Arsenic and Old Lace, and it's explained in the commentary track really nicely. And also there are other players and participants whose career trajectories, both prior to Arsenic Old Lace and then post Arsenic and Old Lace, are discussed. For example, Raymond Massey, I mentioned Raymond Massey, the character of Jonathan, that's explained here. Priscilla Lane, of course, has a very critical role here. Peter Lorre, his role is explained here, and his presence and his fascinating career prior and post Arsenic and Old Lace. Frank Capra too, same thing, how he became involved in the proceedings in a very direct way, of course. And of course, there are some lovely anecdotes that are then presented too. For example, Josephine Hall and Gina Adair, who play very key roles in the film, and connections to very past connections, maybe in say theater and vaudeville, etc., and also connections with the Broadway show, and also some really interesting human relation anecdotes having to do with the early days of Archie Leach, etc. So this is again many interesting anecdotal secrets, if you will, do emerge in the context of this great Charles Dennis commentary track. And so I am very, very happy with this commentary track. It is very lovely. It feels complete. It feels so fresh. It's so well presented, and it has a nice welcoming feel to it. And I like the demeanor and the manner of speaking of the commentator here. It's really lovely indeed. So a great commentary track. It's a wonderful addition to the wealth of commentary tracks we find in the Criterion catalog. So please check this out if you can with the commentary track. I strongly recommend it. Now let us turn our attention to the supplements section, which you can find in the submenu of this wonderful Criterion release. Now, it might seem on paper that the number of supplements is quite low, because indeed we only have 2 supplements in terms of quantity. And so when compared to, say, other supplements or other releases from Criterion, one can say that it is indeed on the low end of things when it comes to the number or quantity of supplements. But let's speak a little bit more about that a little bit later. First, what are those supplements? So the first up is a radio broadcast, a 1952 radio broadcast of Arsenic and Old Lace. This is approximately 59 minutes. And what's so great about it's great to have the radio broadcast, this radio play adaptation, and it's fun to hear this version. Again, I'm not familiar with the radio broadcast history of Arsenic and Old Lace, or radio adaptation history of Arsenic and Old Lace, so this was a first time listen for me, and it was really a lot of fun to listen to and to hear maybe certain nuances and tones that are similar to and also quite distinct and different from the way that Arsenic and Old Lace plays as a film, the 1944 released film. So it was fun to listen to it on that level, and also very fun too because it features Boris Karloff in the key role of Jonathan. And for those who know the film Arsenic and Old Lace and Raymond Massey's role, but the references to Boris Karloff, also Boris Karloff's the significance of his performance regarding the Broadway play. It's very fascinating to hear Boris Karloff now take on this role in this manner. So for that and other reasons, the radio play is very fascinating and a wonderful and entertaining value indeed. So this is approximately 59 minutes. So you'll get a sort of a shot on the screen as you listen to the audio. So it's a lot of fun. So please check it out if you can. And then the second supplement is the trailer. It's the sort of the trailer at the time. So that completes the supplements in terms of what we're getting. So we're getting the commentary track, and then we get this radio broadcast from 1952, and then we get the trailer. So including the commentary track, we're only getting on paper 3 supplements. And so what do I make of this? Of course, I wish there were more supplements. I wish, for instance, that there could have been maybe some breakdown. Maybe I'm speculating here. It would have been nice, for instance, to get a breakdown or a video discussion on, say, the similarities and differences between the Broadway play or the original play and Arsenic and Old Lace, the film. It might have been interesting to get more this discussion about, I don't know, the role of this film in the trajectory of, say, the career of Cary Grant or Peter Lorre or Priscilla Lane or others, etc. That would have been very interesting indeed. Or other aspects which I'm sure could have been subject of really wonderful and enlightening video essay discussions, as Criterion is very famous for. So the fact that Arsenic and Old Lace Criterion release here is not including any supplement of the sort is on one level somewhat curious, I would say. Now, with that being said, I will then draw your attention once again to the great strength of the Dennis commentary track. I mean, it is, again, for those points that I mentioned, that say, I wish it would have been nice to have a video essay on, for example, you can find corresponding points of discussion in the commentary track. And so if you are seeking out that type of discussion, or if you are curious like I am as to say why Criterion didn't include such video discussions, then I would point your attention once again to the commentary track, because you're probably going to get a lot of what you were seeking by listening to that great commentary track. So once again, it would have been nice to have video essays or the like, maybe an overview of Frank Capra's career, how this figured into his career overall. That would have been very interesting as well. But you do get those within the commentary track itself. So I'm of two minds of this. I'm on the one hand, I would have loved to have seen more stuff, that's for sure. But at the same time, that then further highlights for me the real strengths of the commentary track. I mean, if it didn't have the commentary track, then I would be even more curious as to the seeming lack of supplements, at least relatively speaking, compared to others. But at the this very point, I think is covered with the brilliance of the commentary track. So I'm of two minds of this. It would have been nice to have more, but it's saving grace, and it's indeed a very thorough and wonderful saving grace indeed, is the inclusion of this brilliant commentary track. So in terms of the supplements discussion. So that's, again, my 2 cents on this. I know maybe some people might feel differently. Maybe they might feel more critical when it comes to a release like this and the, relatively speaking, lack of supplements, at least on paper anyway. So I totally understand if you feel that way. But once again, I would then strongly suggest, if you haven't already, listening to the great commentary track, because I know that there will be a lot of points. There are a lot of points covered in it already that are definitely worth listening to. So that's my 2 cents when it comes to the supplements release with regard to Arsenic and Old Lace from Criterion. And now let us talk about the insert and also the packaging presentation. So I should point out this great cover art design and this wonderful purple motif. The art is credited to art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, designer F. Ron Miller. And I love this. This is so cool. It's so witty and inventive, and it has that wonderful, say, playful charm about it, but also a sense of the macabre and somewhat of the wicked, which I think is a perfect encapsulation in many respects of the film itself and the various blends that we can find embodied within its running time. And so I love this, and also the purple use and everything, and the font, which is carried over here into the back as well, which I love. You have the disc here, and we have the inside presentation. Now on this side, you would have had the insert housed, and as I mentioned before, I've already taken the liberty of removing the insert for purposes of this video discussion. And this motif is carried on with such glee and with such inventiveness, I think, in terms of the presentation here. I should point out here, I love this picture here. Again, it's a nice soft reminder of what we had seen in the earlier Criterion Laserdisc days. So well done for that. It is the fold-out type, and I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. I'm not a fan of the fold-out type. I wish Criterion could do the staple booklet for each and all of its releases, but that doesn't take away from the brilliance of the essay, which is included here. This is David Cairns' essay. It is called Madness in the Family. And once again, if you are looking for possible, say, if you were critical of the Arsenic and Old Lace supplement section, then I can I can suggest checking out the great commentary track. That's one place to go. And another place to go would be this great essay, Madness in the Family. It does talk about the trajectory of this film in the context of the careers of Frank Capra, Cary Grant, and others. In particular, it does focus in on the way in which this role is in many respects a type of fascinating one and a very malleable one in the context of the career of Cary Grant, etc. And then also the way in which we have certain plot beats that are spoken about. I love the opening of this essay too. It says, "Arsenic and Old Lace, the best film ever made about the construction of the Panama Canal," which I think is a lovely opening. I think it's a really, really clever opening to an essay. So, you know what they say about writing, you know, a lot has to do with the opening line. And if that's the case, then this essay really, I think, takes the cake when it comes to brilliant opening lines. So I think that is another example as to why this essay is so great the way it is. Please check it out if you can. This is Madness in the Family. Once again, with all the other essays, I strongly recommend checking out the film first. And then after you've seen the film, you can read the essay because it does go in depth. It does, I think, it's written from a perspective that assumes that the reader will have already seen the film. So please watch the film first, but after you've done so, you can read this great essay, which is called Madness in the Family. And so with that, my friends, that is the Criterion release from 2022 of this film, Arsenic and Old Lace. A return to form in the sense that we have an older Laserdisc title now coming back into the physical media fold of Criterion. While it would have been nice to perhaps see more supplements in the supplements menu, I grant you. At the same time, what is included, especially in terms of the essay and also the commentary track, this is a real high quality stuff. And so I strongly urge you to check out those supplements and those essays and those points of further exploration if you have the opportunity. It's really well worth it. And then, of course, there's the film itself, which is ultimately so wicked and clever and witty and funny and so entertaining from beginning to end. And so, my dear friends, this is the film from 1944, or released in 1944, I should say, the Frank Capra work, which is Arsenic and Old Lace. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies, including Arsenic and Old Lace. So until we see each other again at the next video, please take very, very good care of yourselves, and cheers.